Hey everybody, and welcome back to Fantasy Football Game Week 12. I did actually record a video for Game Week 11, but it was a bit crap, and not really because of the stuff going on in it, but I just kept getting interrupted the whole time. It was just one of those ones where it was like, wasn't to be. So, and it's a shame because I had a really good week. I got 80 points. Palace had a great week, won 5-1 away to West Brom. Wouldn't say there were many other kind of crazy results. Spurs beat Arsenal, which I fully expected them to do. Man United came from behind to beat City, which was quite a good result. Liverpool smashed Wolves. Man City beat Fulham, which was to be expected. I think it was a pretty steady week, really. This week wasn't quite so good, mostly I think because of Jota here. I put Jota in midweek because, spoilers, I got married at the weekend, so I knew I wasn't going to be doing anything from like Thursday. So like midweek I thought, I needed to switch out someone in midfield. I can't remember actually who I switched out now. Does it show me my previous week's team? Yeah, Rodriguez, because I was like, he hasn't been doing it. So I got rid of him, put in Jota, who's similar price that I could afford, thinking, Liverpool are playing against Fulham, and they'd most likely play him. Then he went yellow, and then he went red. And none of my bench players play because Pereira was suspended, etc., etc. So 0 points there. Not much going on with Robertson, Grealish, Zaha, Chilwell, quiet week, Werner, Chelsea, losing 1-0 to Everton. Not a great result for them. Calvert-Lewin scored. Son got an assist. Kane obviously scored. Vestergaard got a clean sheet, so there's really not much going on. It wasn't a particularly high scoring week. Average was 51. I got 48. Previous week was 62. But in the league, that dropped me down to 9th. So a 78 pointer there from Garsford Blues. Did anybody else beat that? No. Very excellent work there. Salah captain, Klitsch, good shout. Kane, Calvert-Lewin, Adams, yeah, that's a good shout. Southampton, I'm going to be paying a bit more attention to. They're looking pretty good. Where are we? Yeah, so I'm going to try and kind of blitz through the results quickly because I actually want to talk about kind of where we are, because we're 12 games into the season, which is pretty close to a third of the way through the season, and things are kind of shaping up for, I think, what would be quite an interesting final 2/3 of the season or mid-season, as it were. I think we're firmly getting into mid-season now. And I think it's really interesting how some of the teams are playing. So rather than necessarily go through a lot of the results, I actually thought it might be a little bit better to talk about the teams and how their form's doing as we kind of go through. And a lot of teams, I think, will warrant 30 seconds worth of chat, and a lot of other teams might warrant a bit of a longer chat. So at the minute, first place in the league, Spurs drew with Crystal Palace this week, which I was very happy with Palace's results there. I fully expected us to get beaten by Spurs. I think they're a very good side, and with Palace as a team who like to counter-attack primarily, a team who sits quite deep and counter-attacks like Spurs, doesn't often do us a favour there. And when I saw Kane score that first goal, I did think, here we go. But actually it was a really good result, I think, the 1-1. And even though Guaita made a series of really good saves, we certainly took the game to Tottenham. And, I think I'll talk about Palace and how they're doing, I'm sure. But, from Spurs' point of view, I think with the way everybody else did that week, they won't be too disappointed. Now, from the season as a whole, they've only lost once. Goals for 24. They've only conceded 10. Does that have the meanest defence in the league? Yes, it does. So the best defence in the league at the minute, Jose Mourinho, this is what he does. I've always said that I think Jose works a lot better at clubs who are more underdogs. rather than when he goes to a Man United or a Real Madrid. Although he did win things at those clubs, I thought the people who were just writing him off were very short-sighted. He definitely can still do a job at places. It does look like he's had to change maybe his approach to some things. You do feel as well that they're on a good run at the minute. If they do happen to lose Kane or Son, what happens to the team? Can those replacements, who they actually finally have this season, to be fair, in previous seasons Spurs have just not had a plan B for Kane. They do this season. They do have a number of options who they can bring in, Bale, Vinicius, Lucas Moura, these guys. It would be really interesting if what Son or Kane or whatever, if those guys can step up. I think that will really define Spurs' season, because I personally can't see Kane and Son lasting 38 games of a Premier League season. So we'll have to see how they're doing, plus a Europa League campaign, plus cup matches, etc, etc. I know that they do get rested a lot in the Europa League, but I wonder if Spurs do progress further, I know that they've obviously been drawn, but they've gone through to the next round. But if they get deep into the competition, kind of what happens then if they are still challenging for the league? Right now, I'm sure Spurs fans are absolutely delighted. Mourinho's come in and done a fantastic job, really, hasn't he? Just making this a really strong, defensive unit of a team. I constantly say that leagues are won by defences. You can have, this is my criticism of Chelsea, who will come on to, but my criticism of them was that they had this wonderful attack, but ultimately leagues are won with defences. So unless they could sort out their defence, and by the way, I think they've done a much better job in the last few games, unless they could do that, I felt like they would never be able to mount a title challenge. But Spurs definitely are managing to do that. And when you have these players up front in such rich veins of form like Son and Kane, then it's seriously dangerous. A seriously dangerous team, which you cannot take lightly. So I'm sure they'll be happy. Liverpool, considering the injuries they've got, I think they're doing very well. They're obviously on the same points, the same record as Spurs. The goal difference is obviously skewed by the Aston Villa result. So, if that was a normal one, there'd only be, or maybe 12 or 13 goals conceded, 27 scored, the highest in the league still, even though they've had a lot of players injured. They still have a very good squad. They've had some young players come through, do well, Curtis Jones, Nico Williams. You do feel, though, that there is this, they're definitely not the same team they were last season, which is, 100% they wouldn't be. I didn't expect them to be with the way this season is. But when a team relies on high intensity play, we've seen teams like that struggle. When you look across Europe at the leagues, you go in Spain, Real Sociedad are top. In Italy, AC Milan are top. In Germany, I think it's Leverkusen are top. In France, it's Lyon and Lille. England, Tottenham Hotspur. None of these are teams who have won the league recently, or in some cases at all ever. So you look at it and go, this season is there for the taking, I think, for these teams which perhaps don't usually play that kind of high intensity pressing game, or have an opportunity to play that because they're not in Europe or have extra responsibilities. Whether we'll get to January and we'll see some teams start to spend because they have to, it will be very, very interesting. I think this will be one of the most interesting January transfer windows we've ever seen, because if teams didn't know at the beginning of the season, which I was confused about because I spotted it from day one, which was that you were going to need an incredibly deep squad. I think Chelsea realised this. I know other teams were trying to be very cautious, obviously from a money point of view with COVID, but perhaps by the time January comes around, vaccines already in the UK are starting to kind of roll out. We're certainly seeing cases rise at the minute. We will do from Christmas, but will we see the clubs start to turn around and go, okay, with some of the fans coming back in, are we going to have that option? It is worth noting at the time I record this video, it does look like London is going to move into tier 3 in the UK, which means they won't be allowed fans of games. So those teams like Tottenham, Chelsea, West Ham, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Fulham won't be allowed fans in the ground when they have had fans because of the rising numbers, unfortunately. Does look like that's very likely. It hasn't been officially announced, but it's incredibly likely that it will be announced like that. So that's obviously sad and disappointing, but it's going to get bumpier before it gets smoother, basically. So overall, I think Liverpool won't be and I think they can't be disappointed with how they're doing. They've qualified for the next stages of the Champions League. They're in the title race, comfortably in the title race. They've got players to come back from injuries. Like, that's the positive, is like, you're playing now, you're playing well, you've only lost one game and it was a little bit freakish. Yes, you've drawn, but your opponents, your traditional rivals have not come along and upped their game. We saw back in the days when Leicester won the league, that incredible league, the kind of the story behind, the Leicester narrative was that the other, so-called big six teams hadn't really stepped up. They all had this like off season, and other than Spurs and possibly Chelsea, all the other, typically big six teams are having an off season. Now, we'll talk about Arsenal in a minute, but I will say I don't consider Arsenal now one of the top six. I think Leicester have consistently been good enough to get into that over the last few seasons. Certainly they've won the league more recently than Arsenal. I think they have a better squad. I think they have a better setup. I think they have a better manager. Historically, yes, you can still say historically from a fan base, Arsenal are a much bigger side, yes. But if we're talking about a top six right now, I think you're including Leicester in that, not Arsenal. In the same way that, if you went historically, you go back 50 years and there'd be other teams in there who are massive, and teams like Man City would be nowhere near it. But, history is all well and good, and it can obviously be a proud feature of your club. But, there's lots of teams like Nottingham Forest who have, proud histories. Aston Villa have won the European Cup. There's many teams in the Championship and lower leagues who have proud histories. It doesn't mean anything nowadays. It clearly seems that even from a financial point of view, Arsenal are not in a position to be able to match the spending of teams at the top. I know that they spent big and brought in Thomas Partey, but before that they hadn't really done very much. And I think that at the minute they're a mid-table side, along with the likes of Wolves, Southampton, Everton. And by the end of the season, they could be worse, but we'll get to that. So Leicester, I think, have had a really good season so far as well. They've dropped, those two games. I think that Fulham one will really have hurt them. If they'd have won that game, they could have been top of the league now. That's, And I think Brendan Rodgers has done a fantastic job. There was this obvious, they did drop off significantly at the end of last season. And I think a lot of people were really down on them at that point, or down on Brendan Rodgers, and all this comes out, he's a fraud, whatever you want to say about him, it's nonsense. He's an excellent manager. They have an excellent squad. They have an excellent setup. They are a model club. They are how football clubs should be run. And I think that them and even Southampton, I think a lot of people should be looking at and going, that's the model we want to follow. Like, where are the big money signings, at Leicester? You look at their squad, there's a lot of players who've come through the youth ranks. There's players who they've brought in which have gone under the radar. I think James Maddison definitely is one of those where he was looked down upon, I think, by what the Big Six was at that point, because he was basically a championship player. I think he came from Norwich, didn't he? And it's. I feel like the traditional big six, they look down on signing championship players. Like, it's not good for their image when there are some fantastic players there who will step up and you can get great value. Look at Ereberecheze, for example, at Palace. Tielemans was a good signing for them. Some guys that they've obviously brought through youngsters. Soyuncu, good, kind of young, solid defender. They've sold well. They've made a lot of money from selling people and then brought in really good players, instead. Vardy, obviously, being just one of the greatest signings they've probably ever made. My worry with Leicester is always what happens when Vardy, the goals dry up. Inevitably, at some point in his career, unlikely to be this season or possibly even next, but, where do they move from there? They will probably have to spend big. I don't think they'll get lucky enough to sign a non-league player for £1 million again. But that is then. This is now. They're in third place, doing very well, I think, and I think they could be pretty proud of what they're doing so far as a team. Same with Southampton. Southampton are a team I'm really quite shocked about, to be honest with you. I never felt like they would be in fourth place at this stage of the season with 7 wins. They're playing good football. They still have a team which, I don't want to be rude to them, but the majority of the squad are, lower table players. But Hasenhüttl, I've always felt he was a really good manager, and he's really getting the best out of them. And it just goes to show, like, knee-jerk reactions. Managers need time. Obviously, everybody knows about the huge loss they had to Leicester that day, 9-1, I think it was. So I'm just turning my heating down. And, it could be easy. I'm sure there were fans who were paying for his blood then and saying, this isn't working, get him out. We need somebody else in. And clearly that would have been a massive mistake. I don't think, when you look at this squad, you look at it and go, how are they that high up? Because, I know Danny Ings and Che Adams are both firing this season, but it does feel like they're a really good team. They're a lot more than the sum of their parts. And that really, really is what football is about at the minute, I think, is you can go away, and I don't want to say the Chelsea way, because I think Chelsea aspire to create a great team, but they have at the minute a collection of individuals and are not quite at that team. If they do click and get to that team, they'll be scary as hell. But, you do feel like they're more kind of like a collection of individuals than a team at the minute. Mostly because there's a lot of new players in there. But with Southampton, you do feel like they're, an incredible team. I mean, I would imagine that entire Southampton team was probably constructed for less than the price of Kai Havertz and Timo Werner. Maybe even one of them singly. I don't know the exact prices of all these players, but I can't remember who cost more than about 10 million from this squad. I can't remember how much Danny Ings cost. I don't think it was a lot. So just goes to show, that there are, don't get me wrong, I don't think Southampton will be in fourth come the end of the season, but I do think that they'll be top 8, and I think that would be a fantastic season for them. Chelsea, I'm sure Chelsea will have mixed feelings. On the one hand, you turn around and go, you're 5th. That's not good enough. On the other hand, you go, you're 3 points off the top, so you're fine. Like, I've always felt with Chelsea that the first half of the season, or the first third of the season, was going to be their weak point, because they have so many new players coming in, and this manager who has to kind of work out what his best team is. And I still don't think he quite knows 100% what his best team is. You've had players who have adapted very well to, coming in and playing, and then other players who I think certainly look like they need a bit more time. I'd say Timo Werner is one of them. I don't think he's been bad. I don't think he's been a flop or anything like that. Same with Kai Havertz. I just think they need a little bit more time to really click. But when they do click, and they will, they're both, they're both world-class players. They will click, and when they do, they will propel Chelsea. And as I said, like, I always felt that if Chelsea could hang in there, and be around the top, by the second half of the season, then they are a massive danger, and I still believe that. I still would say Spurs are favourites at the minute, unless they get major injuries. But, Chelsea for me, I wouldn't even call it a dark horse. I'd call it a very, very close competitor, Mendy's come in and done really well. Obviously, he didn't do quite so well in the game just gone. Giving away the penalty, Sigurdsson scored. It happens. I don't think it's a sign of Chelsea, collapsing or anything like that. Kurt Zuma's been a massive danger up front. Weirdly, probably has he scored more than any midfielder at the minute? Yeah, he has. In fact, he scored the most of anyone at the club in the league. He scored 4 goals. Timo Werner scored 4 goals. Yep. Interesting. Yeah, but as I said, once I think they start clicking and they get some guys back from injuries or give some guys some playing time, Pulisic, etc., I think they're going to be a real force. And they're 3 points off the top, which is nothing right now. Absolutely nothing. So I don't think they're too disappointed. My biggest issue is I do feel that Lampard is a guy who still is learning the job, undoubtedly. I know, even Roy Hodgson is learning things, but what I mean is that, there are scenarios where he, will not be used to, which will be coming up from, if Chelsea do get to the top of the league, that pressure of being at the top of the league, that pressure he's probably feeling now being 5th in the league, that pressure, of all these different scenarios, the pressure of being behind in a game and coming back, like in the West Brom game, etc. All these kind of pressures, which he hasn't probably experienced before at this level. Has he got the experience to kind of push through? I mean, this is his debut season, effectively. What can he... Well, it isn't, but in terms of, he didn't have any money last season. He wasn't hit the pressure. This is his debut pressure season, What can he do when he's expected to win? It's a whole different ballgame then, when you come out of a loss, and it's not, well done lads, you tried, unlucky, we're on the training ground on Monday, when it goes to, you should have won that, you're on the training ground tomorrow, back to work, how does he cope with that? And I'm not saying he can, he can't, I don't know. I'm saying we've got to wait and see. It's interesting that in the Premier League, 3 of the so-called top 6 or historical top 6 have rookie managers, essentially. And I say rookie as in when you compare them to Jose Mourinho, Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, there's a world of difference. And, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Mikel Arteta and Frank Lampard, are a younger generation of managers, undoubtedly, haven't got league wins in their belts, haven't got European Cups under their belts. How will they, how are they going to cope with the pressure? And at the minute, you'd have to say Frank Lampard is doing the best out of them. I don't know whether he can continue onwards. Time will tell. The one thing I will say is of the teams, facing injuries or whatever, Chelsea are the best prepared. And I think once that team blends a little bit and does become used to a system or whatever and starts playing, they could become very dangerous. Of course, they might not, and it might all go wrong. We don't know. But they're 3 points off the top, and that's fine, Next up, you have West Ham and Everton. I kind of group them 2 together because they are slightly different. Everton have spent a fair amount of money, yes, and they have Carlo Ancelotti compared to David Moyes, but they have exactly the same records, very similar goal differences, and I feel like they're having kind of very similar seasons in that they're both very good sides, lacked a little bit of consistency here and there, and but they're still very dangerous, and they're in 6th and 7th right now, which I think they'll be very happy with personally. Everton fans might feel a bit disappointed because they dropped off a bit from being at the top, towards the beginning of the season. But I think they'll just be very happy that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is looking like a top quality striker. Rodriguez has kind of dipped in form a bit, but we can see he can do it in the Premier League. I think Alan's looked really good. Decore looks solid. I always thought he would look pretty solid. Richarlison coming back from injury is a bonus. And I think, West Ham and Everton more so, but I think they can make a push for that top 4, but I think it will be quite difficult for them. They don't have Europe to worry about, so that is a plus, but nor do Southampton, nor do West Ham, so we'll see. But I think West Ham are looking like a really solid team right now. They're nothing special, as in, you're not going around, smashing people off the park. It's like 1-0, 1-0, 2-1, lost 3-1, 1-2-1. They're stingy, they're a solid David Moyes team. He's doing with West Ham what he did with Everton all those years ago. And I think West Ham fans will be delighted to be at the end of the table, but we'll see where they are at the end of the season. Everton, I think there's definitely a longer term plan there and a style of play there, what they want to play. And Ancelotti is that figurehead, that statesman-like figure they've got. We'll see how they kind of go through. Man United and Man City. I feel like it's weird, but it feels like City, they're in 9th, are, they're 6 points off the top, which is, again, it's nothing really when you think about it. And Man United are 1 point ahead of them. I feel like there's this feeling that Man United are in more of a crisis than City. I don't know why it feels like that, but I feel like with City, people are just like, oh, they're having a bit of a blip this season. They're still in the Champions League. They'll probably still win something this season. They'll probably still get top 4 this season. But undoubtedly, those kind of 2 losses that they've had have hurt them. I think with Man United, the difference is like City, they've had trouble finishing games. Like they've only scored 17 goals this season, which way less than they normally would do. Defensively, they've looked much better, certainly since they brought in Ruben Diaz. But weirdly, in an attacking sense, which you don't think of for the Pep Guardiola side, they've struggled a little bit. I think losing Aguero has not helped. But I also feel that they should have looked for a replacement for Aguero like last season, really. Maybe they pushed back the plans because of COVID or whatever, but it does puzzle me the way City have not replaced Aguero. I don't think Jesus is good enough to cut it as a lone striker. I don't think he's world class. I think he's very, very, very good, but I don't think he's going to win your Champions League or leagues. He's not a Lewandowski, I think City need that. Who that will be, I don't know. Maybe they're holding up for someone like Haaland or something like that. I'm not sure, but when they do have it, they'll be right back up there. I do think that they'll push back up. I mean, they're 4 points off Southampton, which again is nothing. They're 6 points off the top, which is nothing. So I don't think they're having a terrible season. I think they're just, having 1 or 2 little blips here and there, really. It all feels a little bit calmer at Man City, but at Man United, it feels all over the place. Like, it feels like the world has exploded, which is so odd because they have the best form in the last 5 games of any team in the league. They're a club in crisis. I guess what it says is there's a difference between when you're Man City and you have a style of football you're playing, when you have a manager who's been there and done that experience-wise, and you have this plan in place. And sure, that plan might not be working, but at least you have a plan. At Man United, it feels like they have this inexperienced coach. They don't know how he's going to work out these situations. And it doesn't feel like they really have much of a plan other than give the ball to Bruno Fernandes and hope he does something with it. They have this weird they have a defence which is not really working very well. They've conceded 17, which is not crazy when you compare it to Southampton or Liverpool, obviously scored less, or Everton above them. But it's the manner of some of these wins though as well. Like the 1-0 against West Brom was not good. They didn't play well. They didn't play well against City the weekend, but nor did City. they've gone out of the Champions League when they were in a brilliant position through inept defence, and it feels like they could drop lower rather than moving up. I feel like with City, I expect them to move up in the league by the end of the season. With Man United, I'm not sure I do. I think they're about where they deserve to be under Ollie, and they clearly have a much better squad. The Paul Pogba thing keeps rearing its head. He's similar to Ozil, that they should have just cut their losses and really got rid of him, because it just feels so poisonous to have a player like that at your club. And I mean that in a way that they should have done better with him. When you sign a player for 100 million, you should have, I said this in the video that didn't come about, which is that you should have built the team around Paul Pogba. He is that good, but he does need help. He's not going to walk into any side and just fit in there in whatever role you want and just be brilliant. He needs a specific role. You know, that role he had at Juventus where he looked so good and caused them to pay 100 million for him. But he needed a Pirlo and probably Marquisio there, you know, and they're expecting him to kind of do this role with McTominay and Matic, you know, and it's like, it's never going to work. I think it is a problem of him not really respecting the coach, because because of, you know, I just feel the inexperience of Solskjaer there. Whether he's dealing with the situation well with Paul, we don't know. I felt like after the comments his agent made, he should never have played in the derby. And yet, was it the derby or the game before that? The PSG game, sorry, I think it was. But he still brought him on at like half-time or something. Now, Pogba, he's not down tools, he's not playing badly, but my point is that Man United are acting like Paul Pogba's bigger than the club. And that's not a good way to go. He clearly doesn't want to be playing for a mid-table side in the Europa League. He clearly thinks he can play at a better club than that. As I said, I think the problem has been Man United have not really built the team around him, and instead have just tried to fit him into whatever team. And partly maybe because he's had different managers in his time there who haven't really had too much of a plan, and who get the feeling like if Pogba was maybe working under someone like Ancelotti, who's much better at managing these big stars than Mourinho or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you get the feeling like he might have excelled a little bit more. But yeah, we are where we are, aren't we, really? I feel like it's a bit too late now for Man United. They need to cut their losses. Whether that means selling him for 50 million and taking that cut, just learn from Arsenal and just get rid and move on, you know? Because in my opinion, Paul Pogba is not a player who you cannot replace, in terms of, if you're not prepared to build the team around him, then what you're getting is really just a slightly above average midfielder. If you build the team around him, I think, and get players in to complement and support him, then you can get a really great player out of it. But if you're not prepared to do that, if your style doesn't dictate that, or you know, you can't find the right players to do that, then what you end up with is really a slightly above average midfielder. And in that case, just sell him, you know, let him be someone else's problem, to be completely honest. And yeah, there's lots of issues at Man United, clearly, that they're just not, it's not working right now. I wonder if Ollie's going to make it to the end of the January season. The whole Poch thing kind of in the background, I guess, doesn't really help him, but, you know, we'll see. Aston Villa, I think, have done really well. They've had a little blip recently, but they'll be very happy with 10th, I think. They've looked really good in places. They've looked a much better side than they did last season. Martinez in goal, I think, has been phenomenal, and I don't think he should be underestimated. Grealish takes the headlines a lot, but I think Arsenal sold the wrong keeper. Yeah, I think they genuinely did. And, you know, they've only conceded 13 this season, which is one of the lowest in the leagues. Still scoring 21. Grealish has obviously looked really good. They seem to have some quite good depth, although you do think that, like, without Grealish, they're a bit like Crystal Palace, who are in a similar position to them in the league, where, if we lose Wilfred Zaha, if Aston Villa lose Jack Grealish for any extended period of time, they will struggle. Not saying they're one-man teams, although in Palace's case, I would say that. But they do have more options at Aston Villa, I think, than they do at Palace, perhaps. Or they're less reliant upon Grealish, but they still will really struggle without him. And I think Grealish is much more likely to be sold than Zaha. Definitely not in January, but at the end of the season, unless Villa maybe get into Europe, but I don't think they will. I think Jack Grealish will move to a bigger club, and he deserves to, Palace, the team I support, I'm very happy with 11th. I'm disappointed with the inconsistency, and I'm disappointed with the, those 2 losses against clubs lower than us in the league. We should have done better. Even a couple of points would have put us, a lot higher up, but a couple of wins from those would have put us in, 4th place effectively. So very disappointed. But that's Crystal Palace. They're very inconsistent. We lost Wolf for those 2 games. It shows. We got Wolf back against West Brom. We battered them. Eze is really coming through as a top quality player. He looks so good in Championship. And as I said, I think I did that little kind of role play at the beginning of the season, had some fun with it, where I was an agent looking at players for Arsenal. And I said that I genuinely thought he would be brilliant at Arsenal. And I did think that. I knew Arsenal would never buy him because they will turn their noses up at a player like that. They will spend 70 million on a Nicolas Pepe, who is completely unproven in the Premier League and had one good season in the French league, which is not the most competitive league in the world. And try and buy this ready-made product and think that they get themselves some sort of deal on him, and then he turns out to be complete crap. And then what they really needed was, and they didn't even need him, by the way, but what they really needed was a ball-carrying midfielder who can play passes, because they didn't want to use Ozil for whatever their reasons are. And there's this, £20 million player in the Championship. He's 22, he's English, and he's top quality. And he's proving it for Palace. He is proving it. These last few games he has been phenomenal in. And he's going to start running that team, I'm telling you now. And it's great because it's taking the pressure off Wilf to just be able to do his thing and not feel like he's got to come up with all the answers to everything. And it's fantastic to watch this, 22-year-old just light up Selhurst Park. It's phenomenal. I love him. Benteke got 2 last week, which was, a miracle. But if he can get back to some sort of form, Palace can stay mid-table. I don't think we'll get any higher than that. We're far too inconsistent, but we're a dangerous side, and we won't get relegated. We're 9 points off relegation at the minute. I just don't see it happening, to be honest with you. A third of the way through the season, I don't see it happening personally. Undoubtedly, with Crystal Palace long term, there's lots of questions to be answered. How much longer can Roy go on? The guy's in his 80s, for goodness sake. What's the next plan? What happens with Wilf? What happens with Eze? At the end of the season, if one of those big clubs come in and wants to pay us 50 million for him, can we stand in his way? And even that, I would say, would be a bit of a bargain, especially with, foreign numbers and things like that for players, etc. If a City or I don't think Chelsea would, but I could imagine him going to somewhere like Leicester or Tottenham or something like that for 50 million. I'd be gutted, but I think he's a brilliant player. And hopefully Palace can keep him for another few seasons and really see him develop. And, I wouldn't begrudge the guy to kind of move on from there, really. Newcastle, I think, are having a really good season. I know Newcastle fans are not particularly happy right now with what's happening. They don't like the style of play under Steve Bruce. They don't feel like they've pushed on at all. I get it that Newcastle, people call Newcastle fans entitled. I disagree with that. I don't think they're expecting to win the league. What I think they want is a plan and a style of football that is a little bit more akin to, a little bit more entertaining. I think they'd be quite happy with 12th if they were playing that more entertaining football, and they lost some games 3-2 rather than, like a 2-0, 2-0 sort of thing. They actually went for some games rather than sitting back. But, number one on Steve Bruce's list is staying in the Premier League, and he'll do that. I'm really sure on that. So, and I mean, they could go up to 8th if they won like 5-0 on that game in hand. Well, sorry, they don't have a game in hand on those guys, so it's unlikely, but they certainly could move above Palace, put it that way, into 11th. It's a really good result. I get that Steve Bruce is not Rafa Benitez. He's never going to be, but he is, a experienced quality manager, I think. He's not going to win you the league. He probably won't get you into Europe. Probably won't win you a cup, but he'll keep you in the Premier League. And I think until Newcastle get that new owner, that's what they want. So I'd be careful what you wish for if I was a Newcastle fan, because if they, really start getting on everyone's back and get Bruce out, I don't think they've got the players right now to play in a much more fanciful way. They do have better players, I think, now than they did under Rafa Benitez. When you see St. Maximin, etc., it looks good. I think Joel Linton's a better player than we're seeing. I feel there's a touch of Firmino about him, where he's come over and people have thought he was this number 9, but he's not. And he needs somebody to kind of unlock him in that way. Callum Wilson is definitely number 9, and he's done well this season, 7 goals. But I think the midfield lacks a little bit. I don't think Almiron's ever really stepped up, in the league. Defence can be a little bit dodgy at times. Dubravka's interesting because he's really, he looked really good when he came in, and he's been ditched for Carl Darlow, I think, this season. Unless he's injured. He could be injured, I don't know, actually. So, yeah. Where am I? Back on the table. So, yeah, I think Newcastle can be happy with where they are. Wolves, I think, will be disappointed. I think they feel like they're a team who should be more established up this end of the season. They've been, they've lost their last couple of games quite badly, lost the derby. They've had some injury problems, but I also feel that, losing Diego Jota's obviously hit them. Now losing Jimenez, for probably most of the rest of the season is going to really hit them quite badly. Fabio Silva's 17, you can't really expect him to be picking up the line. I think Adama Traore is not really kicked on this season like a lot of people thought he might. I also feel like people have learned how to play him a little bit better, and he needs to be a little bit, wise to that. And yeah, I think they haven't looked quite so solid at the back as they usually do. So I think they're probably one of the most underperforming sides this season. But again, they're 3 points off 6th, so they're not. It's not a crisis or anything like that. I'm not saying sack Nuno Santos, absolutely not. I'm just saying that they'll be a little bit disappointed, I think, to be 13th at the minute. Scoring goals seems to be a bit of a problem for them. For Leeds, I think they'll be, a lot of people seem to be bigging Leeds up as if they could get top 6 or something like that. I thought it was ridiculous, frankly. And I think that's kind of proving now. I always said that I felt the first kind of half of the season or first third of the season, they would do well in, and then they will tail off in the others when fatigue gets to them. I worry about them now, because if this is their best part of the season, as I'm predicting, then they're only 6 points above the relegation zone. And if one or two of these teams get their act together, I worry Leeds could get dragged right into it. At the minute, they'll probably be fine with 14th debut season back in the Premier League. I think some of their signings have not really worked out. They spent a lot of money on Rodrigo, and he doesn't really seem to be doing anything for them. Bamford is scoring goals for them, doing well. And while you have a goal scorer, you have a chance. If you have someone who can put the ball in the net, you got a chance. But they have been conceding goals quite heavily this season. they're a kind of a team where they're like, it's all or nothing, you know, and certainly they've got the joint second worst defence in the league. You know, they got beat 4-1 by Palace, and Palace is not a side which scores that many goals. Although, going back to Palace, we'll say we scored way more goals than we ever had at this stage of the season before, like way more. So that is positive for Palace. Yeah, so I think they're okay with where they are, but I'm worried for Leeds because I think they're going to drop off in the second half of the season, and I'm intrigued to know what that's going to entail. Arsenal are the one we could talk about all day long, right? Here's my thoughts on Arsenal to kind of sum up right now. They've been mismanaged for years. Like, the owners have got very little clue, and once Wenger left, who I felt was really doing everything at the club, it fell apart because they trusted in people who clearly were taking them for a ride and using that club to sign, you know, mates and things like that. Like, they recently got rid of their, I don't know if he was like their technical director or director of football, but something quite high up, and it was heavily implied that he was taking, you know, payments from agents or whatever for, you know, how could Willian get a 3-year contract, for God's sake? Behind the scenes, I think they've been pretty terrible. They've been PR disaster after PR disaster. You have players taking pay cut from COVID to secure no staff getting redundancies. Then they make over 50 people redundant, including Gunnosaurus. You know, they have the Ozil situation, which they just have not managed to do anything with. Like, what? Just pay the guy off. You're paying him anyway. He's there causing trouble. Literally, pay the rest of his contract off. And wave goodbye. You might say, well, they can't afford that. Well, they afforded 50 million for Thomas Partey after making 50 staff redundant. They're a joke of a club, in my opinion, in the way they're run. They are horrific. And that is what's caused them to be down in 15th, in my opinion, not Mikel Arteta. I don't think Arteta is the Messiah who is going to come in and turn Arsenal's fortunes around. But I feel like he has not stood a chance since he got there, because he did quite well with them. He won the FA Cup. You know, he beat some big teams. He got that team playing in a certain style. But then I just feel like all these behind the scene things are just adding up. And he also probably is lacking a little bit of experience of what to do when you're in a rut like this. And, you know, people are ripping them at the minute because they're crossing the ball constantly, despite having strikers who are not known for scoring headed goals. Even against Burnley, they're trying to, you know, cross the ball in. Burnley are just laughing, you know, as they head the ball out. They're you know, the striker who they were praising to the heavens, who signed a new contract, you know, has barely scored this season apart from I've barely scored the season. Let's have a look how many goals. I think he scored 2. Yeah, sorry, he has scored 2, but I think one was a penalty. Lacazette scored more in less games. Pepe with 1, £70 million player. Willian, 3 assists, which I think was in his first game. You know, God knows how many hundreds of thousands a week he's on for 3 years. It doesn't look good, does it? Granit Xhaka gets sent off at the weekend, grabbing someone's throat. What is it? Granit Xhaka, for me, he's never looked good enough to play for a top 6 club in the Premier League. Like, from day one when they purchased him, he's never looked good enough. I thought when they purchased him, it was kind of widely thought of that he was a bit of a backup, like a bit of a, I think they spent like 50 million, but I never felt like he was a bit of a punt, you know, like he wasn't a top quality midfielder. He was somebody who they felt could perhaps get to that level, but he never has. And he's still there and he's allowed to captain the club. It's weird. He's not good enough for them. And he does dumb things like that. Arsenal, since Arteta took over, have had 6 red cards. That's 3 more than, or double what any other club has had in that time. There's clearly discipline issues at the club. They seem to be relying on players who are not really performing for him. Like Rob Holding's played 9 times this season. I don't know how. He's clearly not good enough. They spent like 30 million on this William Saliba. He's never played. Hector Bellerin's playing 12 times. He can't even do a throw in properly. Players like Cedric Suarez, Pablo Mari. Why were they buying these players? Who was buying these players, Mesut Ozil, probably the most creative midfielder in the team, if not possibly even the Premier League, on his day. Arsenal have only scored 10 goals. Only 3 teams have scored less than them. That's Burnley, West Bromwich, Sheffield United. And, he hasn't had 1 minute of game time or even been near a squad for what has to be said political reasons now. It can't be anything else other than political reasons. Like Arsenal are playing badly enough that he would have got 30 minutes somewhere on somewhere against Burnley. It is politically, and if you're going to take that sort of stance, you have to get him out of the club, because every second he's there, on Instagram, on Twitter, whatever, it's just the fans just get more and more pissed off because they're like, we're paying this guy 350 grand a week. You're not playing him. We're playing like trash. We're not creating chances. We've got Aubameyang who can't score from open play, apart from an own goal, because he's getting no chances. You're playing Lacazette in a number 10 role when Ozil is there. Get him out the club. If you're not going to play him, terminate the contract. Pay him off. Don't care if it costs you 20 million, because you're going to pay that anyway. All you're doing when you pay him off is you're paying the remainder of the contract. There's rumours that Fenerbahce are going to come in for him in January. Okay. They're not going to... Ozil's not going to take... Arsenal are going to end up paying at least half of his contract. So they're too tight to get rid of him now. But it's destroying the club. And it's not Ozil's fault. I'm not blaming Ozil for it, because at the end of the day, all Ozil did was take the contract that was offered to him at the time. If you're going to offer him that contract, then what do you want? Like, as far as I'm aware from Ozil, he's never refused to play for Arsenal. Arsenal are the ones who've said they won't pick him. They've been pissed off because he's taken a stance on some political issues that they weren't happy with. Well, I'm sorry, but don't be an arsehole then and support China. It's it's a disaster of a club. And my opinion right now of them is they're a mid-table club and should be talked about in the same way of West Ham, Everton, Wolves, not in terms of being a top European club. Like, if I was putting together a European Super League, I wouldn't have Arsenal in it right now. They're a complete joke of a club. And as I said, I don't think the answer is sack Arteta. It might be the short-term answer. But people were saying today, like, we're in a relegation battle. Arsenal fans are saying, we're in a relegation battle. We need to get rid of Arteta and get someone else in. Do you think this board is capable of replacing Arteta with someone who will do better? Because I don't think they are. They're never going to sign somebody who would take Arsenal out of, like a Big Sam or someone like that, who would legitimately just do a really good job and not get them relegated. So they're going to go with somebody, say, like, people were saying, like, Lucien Favre at Borussia Dortmund just got fired. Get him in. What's he going to do with this team? He's not allowed to play the most creative player. Like, I'm pretty sure whoever comes in will be told, you're not allowed to play Ozil, you're not allowed to keep him. We want him out of the club. And then what? You don't have any other creative midfielders. So I'd say stick with Arteta, like, get him out, because he'll learn getting out of this rut. Again, I don't think Arsenal will get relegated. Genuinely don't. They are 5 points ahead above the relegation zone. They are playing terribly, like one of the worst runs, in their history, or one of the lowest points at this stage in their history. And they've never been relegated. Don't forget Arsenal. And I don't think they'll beat Southampton. In fact, I think they'll lose to Southampton in their next game. I think after that they've got somebody equally difficult, and then I think it's Chelsea after that. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But again, I don't think they'll get relegated. I do think that Arteta will find some sort of tune out of them at some point. But I feel like the issues are not on. Arteta's not perfect. Like, he is playing players who he probably shouldn't be playing right now, and he should have dropped some players out that side before. He probably shouldn't be playing Lacazette right where he is. Whatever you want to say about him, probably shouldn't be playing Willian every week, whatever. But he is. But I don't think it's entirely like. I don't think it's like get a new manager in and we'll be fine. It's not going to solve your issues. You're still going to be a mid-table side because of the way the club's run. And this isn't like based off one season. This is based off like probably the Wenger's last season. Really, Arsenal have been completely a mid-table side. And you'd like to give them benefit of the doubt to kind of get back into that top six. But I think at this point, it's clear that under their current ownership, there is no way they're going to be able to get back in that top six. They're not going to invest and buy their way back in. I don't think they have a manager who's going to be able to get the best out of the players. They have PR disaster after PR disaster at that club. And they make terrible transfers. They just buy. They are terrible in the transfer market. So what hope do they have? If you don't have a lot of money and you're terrible in the transfer market, you're screwed. You can either do a Leicester and find some really good players at a quite cheap price and have that great scouting network, which, by the way, Arsenal just completely sacked their entire scouting network. Or you do a Chelsea and you just buy your way back in. And I don't mean that in a negative way with Chelsea, but they clearly brought top quality players. Arsenal can't afford to do that, and they don't have the ability to do it the other way. So how are they ever going to get back into the top six? They won't. Not in the current ownership, not in the way they're going. They have to completely change the way they do things. And either they stick with Arteta, they build this youth, and they do have some very good young players. They build this youth up, and they take a couple of seasons to rebuild and push their way back up again. Or they buy their way out. Changing the manager will do nothing for them right now. He's not getting a tune out of this team because the team's shit. The team's shit because of a number of reasons, not solely because they don't have enough talented players. It's not. They do have a good team. They don't have a top six squad, in my opinion. They have a top half squad, but and they are underachieving for, I think, the ability of the players they have. So you can argue there and say, well, they should bring in a manager who will at least achieve what they can do and will be in 10th or whatever. But my point is, what's the long-term solution, and what manager is going to want to take over at Arsenal? I don't know, because it feels like they're just run so badly right now. So I don't know. I don't think they will sack Arteta. I think he'll get to the end of the season. They'll see where they are. Again, I don't think they'll get relegated. As much as I genuinely would love that. I would love it if Arsenal got relegated. I think everyone apart from Arsenal fans would love it if Arsenal got relegated. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Brighton could, though. And I say that because they've been this unlucky team this season, but at what point is it luck, and at what point does it change into actually maybe you're not that good? I don't know. Concede a lot of goals, scoring a bit, playing good football, but perhaps trying to achieve too much for the quality of players they've got. I think Graham Potter's a good manager. I do. I just feel like he's trying to play football with a side that's not quite capable of it. They got well and truly kind of pushed aside by Leicester in that first half. Southampton, pushed them. They beat Aston Villa. They drew Liverpool. You felt like they turned a corner. Fulham next is a big game for them because Fulham can leapfrog them if they beat them. Well, that's not a position you want to be in, I don't think, because Fulham don't look very good. But yeah, I think Brighton have really struggled this season. They're in a relegation battle. I think out of that bottom five, they're best equipped to not get relegated. And I think they have the capabilities to build forward, and they have a plan. Like, I think this is why perhaps Potter's not under as much pressure as some other managers, because they clearly have a plan and a style of play that they want to adhere to, and they want to play in this way. It's not quite working out at the minute for them, but they have that plan, and that counts for a lot, I think, rather than just blind panic. Burnley, I think, as well, really struggling. No investment in the team. So Dyche is really doing well. Beat Arsenal, big win for them. I worry for that. I can't honestly say I don't think they'll go down, because they well and truly could. Always said that a little bit of a run of form from one of these, teams down here, and they could pull away. Fulham, West Brom, again, I think they're doing exactly what I thought they would do, which is not even get to double figures by a third of the way through the season. They require a really good run at some point for them to get to that kind of 38-point marker. And Sheffield United, they're really the biggest underachievers. Like, there's no way I thought they would get to, improve upon what they did last season, or even get close to it. But I didn't expect them to be on 1 point after 12 games. That is one of the worst starts in Premier League history, if not the worst start in Premier League history. In fact, I think it is the worst start in Premier League history. They've only scored 5 goals in 12 games, conceded 21. They're atrocious. They are awful. And frankly, I think Chris Wilder's done a brilliant job with them. But if he doesn't feel capable of turning this around with them, then he needs to walk away, because it could get, it's already embarrassing, but it could get seriously embarrassing, the longer this goes on. I don't know what happens on the training ground. And Chris Wilder, it's funny because I've seen a lot of people pile pressure on Arteta at Arsenal or Pep or Ollie or whatever, talking about different teams underperforming. I barely see any comment on Chris Wilder, probably because he has got so much credit in the bank, but the unfortunate thing is that they are atrocious at the minute, and I don't know what he can do to turn it around. I hope he can. I don't want to see him get fired. I think that's the thing. Nobody wants to see Chris Wilder get fired because they realise how much of a good job he's done. But you've got 1 point in 12 games. That is terrible. It's horrific. Any other manager without that credit in the bank would have been fired. We'll see. He probably is fired by the time I send this video out. Something like that always happens. But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, that's my kind of review. I'd say, there are some glaring teams out of where you would think they would be capable of being. Arsenal, I think, should be 5 or 6 places higher than they are. City, I think, should be higher than where they are. West Ham, I would expect to be a little bit lower. But otherwise, I think the league's shaken out fairly well. Southampton, again, are doing a bit better than I thought they would do. When you get down here, other than seeing Arsenal there, which is a bit of a shock, and Wolves perhaps even more of a shock than Arsenal in a way, because they're a much better run club. Although they are 4 points, higher than Arsenal. So, it's not, and only 3 points off, 6th. So it's not quite so bad. And again, with Arsenal, at the end of the day, a couple of wins, they'll be up mid-table sort of thing, and people will kind of be like, Arteta's at the wheel. But their problem is, I think, is that their next few games in the league, Southampton, Everton, Chelsea, at that point you go, will Arteta make it to January? January, you turn around and go, West Brom, Palace, Newcastle, winnable games, definitely 9 points potentially. But or even those 4 games, Brighton, West Brom, Palace, Newcastle, 12 points potentially. The question is, will Arteta make it? Because if he gets 0 points from any of those, they could find themselves in the relegation zone before they even get there. So, yeah, I think it's a tough run of games now over Christmas for Arsenal. And when you've already lost, 4 of your last 5 and a 0-0 draw in the other, it's a worry. You've scored 3 goals in 5 of those games. It's a big worry, isn't it? But yeah, Sheffield United look really bad, and they'll need to have a special, next, they'll need to have a pretty special Christmas and New Year to push themselves out of that relegation zone now. 8 points behind safety at the minute, after 12 games. It's not good. It's not good at all. Yeah. Okay, I think we will wrap that up there, guys. Thank you for watching, as always. Been my pleasure, and I will see you soon. Let me know what you think. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.